שנייה, דיוויד. בבקשה, דיוויד.
Okay. So first of all, I would like to thank Josh Schumann, who's in charge of new media at Schechter, for organizing this Zooming into Hanukkah, the Maccabees of our time. Normally, for every Jewish holiday, we do text study and art study and music study related to that holiday. And needless to say, this Hanukkah is very different from other Hanukkahs, and therefore we decided to do something different. We're not going to talk about the 7 emergency projects that Schechter is doing during the war. We did that on November 19th. And if you click the donate button, it describes there the 7 projects we are doing in Israel now since the war began. Rather, what we're going to do this evening is we're going to speak with 4 of our people connected to Schechter in various ways, who have been directly involved in both what happened on October 7th and what has happened since then in the army and in other capacities. We will begin with the Dvar Torah by myself, and then I will introduce our 4 speakers. Normally, we would say Chagurim Sameach, or Happy Hanukkah at this type of session. Of course, this year, our Hanukkah is very much marred by what's been going on since October 7th, so it's difficult to say Happy Hanukkah. But nonetheless, I think that there is much we can learn from the Hanukkah story and the Hanukkah prayers about our current situation. It is my custom every year on Hanukkah, Shabbat Hanukkah, to read this booklet, which is called Megillat Hanukkah. This is not a classical booklet. This was published 40 years ago by the Rabbinical Seminary, by the Rabbinical Assembly, edited by Rabbi Arthur Scheel. And he took the first 4 chapters of the first book of Maccabees, which is our most important source, Sefer Maccabees Aleph, our most important source of the Maccabee story. And he presented it in a Hebrew edition from the Kahana edition from 1910 with his English translation. And I urge you, if you want to start doing this custom every year, read my article, which is in the chat, which explains why it is important to read the first 4 chapters of Sefer Maccabees Aleph every year on Hanukkah, so that we will know the actual historical story and can pass it on to our children. I would like to share with you 2 things from the first book of Maccabees, the beginning of the first book of Maccabees, and then 2 things from the Hanukkah liturgy. It is very difficult to compare different historical situations and different wars. And it would be a mistake to say that our current war is similar to the war of the Maccabees against the Greek Syrians, because the goal of Antiochus, of Antiochus, was not to destroy the Jewish people. The goal was to subvert Jewish practices, to force the Jews to follow the Greek laws and customs and pagan sacrifices, and thereby integrate them into his empire. And in most of the stories in the first book of Maccabees, you see battles between Greek Syrian soldiers and Judah Maccabee and his brothers and their soldiers. The Maccabees were always greatly outnumbered, but emerged victorious. However, unfortunately, there is one story in the first book of Maccabees which is very similar to what happened on October 7th. And I'm going to read you Rabbi Scheel's translation. At that time, many who wanted to uphold their faith and righteousness went down to the wilderness with their sons, their wives, and their cattle, because misfortunes had fallen upon them. And it was reported to the king's officers and the troops in Jerusalem, the city of David, that men who had disobeyed the king's order had gone down to hiding places in the wilderness. A large force pursued them, overtook them, and occupied positions opposite them. They prepared to attack them on Shabbat. It will be enough, they shouted to them, if you come out as do the king commands, your lives will be spared. But the Israelites answered, we will not come forth, nor will we obey the king's command to break the Sabbath day. Then they attacked them. The Israelites did not defend themselves. They neither threw a stone against them, nor did they barricade their hiding places. For they said, let us all die with a clear conscience. We call heaven and earth to testify that you destroy us unlawfully. In other words, at that time, it was still forbidden to fight on Shabbat. So they attacked them on the Sabbath, and they were massacred, they, their wives, their children, and their cattle, 1,000 people. And the result of that massacre is that Matityahu, the leader of the Maccabees, changed Jewish law and said that from now on we can fight on Shabbat and we can defend ourselves on Shabbat so that this will not repeat itself. And then it goes on to describe one of the victories of Matityahu and his sons against the Greek Syrians. That's in the first book of Maccabees, chapter 2, verses 29 to 43. So even though the goals of that war are very different from Hamas, which wishes to wipe out the Jewish people, in that particular battle, which took place on Shabbat, the results, unfortunately, were very, very similar to what we saw on October 7th. The second thing that I wanted to share with you from the first book of Maccabees is from chapter 3. And this is one of the speeches that Judah Maccabee gives to his soldiers before they go out to battle. And this takes place at Ma'alat Beit Choron. You can pass it if you drive to Tel Aviv on Route 443. There's a place called Beit Choron Elyon and Beit Choron Tachton, Upper Beit Choron and Lower Beit Choron. This speech took place at Upper Beit Choron. And this is what Judah says to his men in English. Judah replied, "Many can be overpowered by a few. It makes no difference to heaven to save many or by few. Victory in battle does not depend on the size of the army, but rather on strength that comes from heaven. They are coming against us full of violence and lawlessness to destroy us, our wives, and our children. They come to plunder us, but we are fighting for our lives and our law. God himself will crush them before us. You have no need to fear them." In the Hebrew, "V'hu yigofotan lefanenu va'atem al tiru mipnehem." This speech by Judah Maccabee could have been uttered by one of our commanding officers in the current war. So that is a true parallel to many of the speeches going on now among our commanders, both in Gaza and in other places in the land of Israel at this time. So these are two parallels from the book of Maccabees, written in Eretz Yisrael some 2,200 years ago, and very relevant to what's going on today in Israel. The last thing that I would like to share with you are two sentences from our liturgy. You all know the prayer Al Hanisim, which we recite on Hanukkah. You may not know, however, that there are variants to the prayers. And we recite Al Hanisim v'ala Purkan v'ala Gvorot v'ala Tshuot v'ala Milchamot Sha'asita lavotenu bayamim hahem bazman hazeh, which you did for our forefathers in those days, bazman hazeh, at this time. However, there is a variant reading of that prayer, which exists in many prayer books, bayamim hahem u bazman hazeh, that you have done in those days and at this time. And those who have that version of the prayer with the letter Vav, and, say that we are thanking God for the miracles not only that he did for our ancestors, the Maccabees, but also for the miracles he does for us today. In other words, it's not only a prayer about what happened 2,200 years ago, but a prayer about what is going on now, about our current battle with our enemies. And the last thing is from the end of the Al Hanisim prayer. And this is something that most people do not know, but I love to gather esoteric facts that nobody knows. At the end of Al Hanisim, it says, the last line says, "V'kavush monat yemei Chanukah elu lodotu lalel shimcha gadol." And the Maccabees, or the Hasmoneans, they fixed the 8 days of Hanukkah, lahodotu lalel shimcha gadol, to thank and to praise your great name. However, in many medieval Sidurim, beginning with Seder Rav Amram Gaon, which was written in the 8th century in Babylon, there is an additional sentence at the end of Al Hanisim. And I'm reading from Seder Rav Amram Gaon, the Goldschmidt edition, page 98. It says there, "V'kavush monai yamim elu v'halel v'hoda lishmecha, keshem shasita imahem nes, ken aseh imanu Adonai Eloheinu nisim v'niflaot ba'et hazot, v'nodeh l'shimcha hagadol selah." Just as you did for them a miracle, So do with us, O Lord our God, miracles and wonders at this time, and we will thank you, and we will thank your great name forever. In other words, that in this version of Al Nisim, which was very common in the medieval period, it exists in Ashkenaz, it exists in Sfarad, and of course, among the Babylonian Geonim, it's not only a prayer about miracles which happened in the past, but the person saying Al Nisim is saying to God, just as you did miracles for them, so should you do miracles for us. And I cannot think of a greater way to end this Dvar Torah than by saying this particular sentence. And we hope that as God helped the Maccabees in Eretz Yisrael 2,200 years ago, he will help us defeat our enemies as well, and finally bring shalom to the land of Israel. That is the end of my Dvar Torah. And now I would like to introduce our first speaker. And as I said, all of these four speakers have a connection to the Schechter Institutes, to the various amutot, nonprofits connected to Schechter. The first is Yaloma Zakut. Yaloma is the founder and director of Merkaz Chosen, the Resilience Center in Ofakim. Ofakim was unfortunately one of the cities attacked on October 7th. 52 of its citizens were killed, and many, many others were wounded, and many houses were destroyed. And Yaloma has had a very illustrious career, first in Sahel for 27 years. She was an aviation, I don't know how this is called in English, but I'll do my best translation. She was an aviation electrician, Chashmalait Matosim, in the Israeli Air Force. When she started, she was the only woman who had this job for many, many years among many men. Later on, and she was born and raised in Ofakim, so Ofakim is her city. Beginning in 2013, she founded the Merkaz Chosen, the Resilience Center, because Ofakim was constantly under bombardment from Gaza by missiles and other forms of terrorism. She also founded the Kitat Konenut, the local military squad of Ofakim citizens to protect the people in the town, which was very, very important on October 7th. She has a BA and an MA from Michlelet Sapir in public policy. She started her MA at Schechter. I think she did not yet finish.
לא, סיימתי בהצטיינות, בהצטיינות.
Oh, she finished בהצטיינות, excuse me. She finished with summa cum laude in our MA program at Schechter. And finally, for the past 3 years, thanks to her cooperation, we've been running one of our Midrashet Schechter adult ed branches in Ofakim, out of the Merkaz Chosen, out of the Resilience Center. That program is run by Rabbi Irena Gritsevskaya all over the country. And one of the branches of Midrashet Schechter is in Ofakim. So Yaloma, bevakasha, את יכולה לספר לנו מה שאת רוצה, 10 עד 15 דקות מקסימום. ואם את צריכה עזרה בתרגום, אני אעזור.
כן, אני צריכה. אז נמצאת איתי יעל רקוב דרורי.
את תדברי לגמרי בעברית, או את רוצה...
כן, כן, בבקשה.
אוקיי.
מי מתרגם אותי?
אני.
אוי, איזה כבוד. אני אספר על המלחמות הקודמות, על המלחמה של היום. אני אגיד כמה מילים, אני רוצה להתחיל עם כמה מילים על שכטר, שאולי פעם תזמינו אותי לאיזה ישיבה וכן נוכל לדבר על זה, כי זה כן חשוב לי. אני ייסדתי את בית המדרש הראשון בשנת 2014, יחד עם דורון רובין. דורון עבד אז בשותפות.
אז תני לי לתרגם. She'll talk about some of the previous wars, the current war, and also her connection to Schechter. She founded the first Beit Midrash in Ofakim with the cooperation of Schechter and Doron Rubin, who is about to be ordained by Schechter in 2014.
לי אין רקע דתי. אני מגיעה ממשפחה מסורתית, ההורים שלי ממצרים.
She comes from a traditional background. She doesn't define herself as dati, which means Orthodox. Her parents are from Egypt.
ואני גדלתי באופקים בגרעין של השומר הצעיר, אחר כך התחלתי קצת הנחל של השומר הצעיר, זאת אומרת שמחקו לי לגמרי את הזהות המזרחית שלי ואת הדתית שלי. אני שמעתי שירים של...
She grew up in the Shomer Atzer youth movement in Ofakim, which is either irreligious or was anti-religious, and they erased her original religious identity.
אני אפילו אציין שלא הרשיתי להורים שלי לדבר ערבית, הייתי כל כך ממש כור היתוך ישראלי של בן גוריון לגמרי אפשר להלביש עליי.
She was part of the melting pot of Israel. She would not let her parents speak Arabic. She wanted to be Israeli.
ובעצם אני חושבת שכשאנחנו מתחילים את בית המדרש, הרעיון היה לגשר בין החיים שלי בצבא והשחרור שלי מהצבא ואופקים, לבין האנשים שרובם פה מסורתיים. רק כדי לנסות לגייס מתנדבים, מצאתי את זה שבית המדרש הוא מין גשר, הוא משהו שמאחד בין קהילות.
We founded the Beit Midrash in Ofakim in order to be a bridge between the different communities in Ofakim, using their religious or Masorti traditional backgrounds.
ואני בכוונה מתחילה עם שכטר, כי אני רוצה שפעם נדבר על זה. הרעיון לבוא וללמוד במדרשת שכטר הוא באמת להעמיק את הנושא הדתי, באמת להתעמק בעומק החומר.
And the purpose of Midrashet Schechter is really to study in depth the Jewish sources.
ואני מגיעה בעצם ללימודים, כשהשפה מאוד מאוד קשה לי. אני עם תואר שני, הגעתי למכללת שכטר עם תואר שני, והשפה מאוד קשה לי. זה לא משהו שהאוזן שלי הייתה רגילה לשמוע.
When she came to study at Machon Schechter, at the Schechter Institute, the language was foreign to her. She didn't know the language of the sources.
וההתייחסות בכיתה, התייחסות אחת לכל האנשים, בין אנשים שגדלו בבית של מסורתיים, אני מתכוונת לקהילה המסורתית, לבין אנשים רפורמים שהם גדלו עם תפילות, לבין אישה כמוני שלא מכירה תפילות, לא קראה, אולי למדתי בתנ"ך בשפה אחרת בבית הספר, אבל אני חושבת שהקושי של האנשים, של המקום לקבל אותנו כאופקים, היה מאוד קשה גם למדרשה עצמה וגם לנו, ואני לא הייתי רוצה לוותר על זה. אני חושבת שאנחנו יכולים לעבוד יחד כדי להחזיר את זה, בעיקר כי אני חושבת שזה מה שיחבר את החברה הישראלית.
Okay, she said when she came to Schechter, she was treated as an equal, even though she did not have a strong background and others had much stronger backgrounds. אבל יהלומה, חשוב גם לדבר על המצב הנוכחי.
אני עכשיו אדבר, כן. אבל אני כן רוצה להדגיש, אני חושבת שכל החברה הישראלית צריכה להתאמץ בעצם לאיחוד הזה, לאיחוד של העם.
The entire Israeli society should work to be united and to using Judaism as a bridge.
המלחמה הזו היא שונה ממלחמות קודמות. מלחמות קודמות בעצם היו אזעקות ונפילות של גרדים, כשהטיפול בגרד עצמו הוא בעצם אחרי שיש נפילה, זה טיפול בפצועים, בנפגעי חרדה ובאזור עצמו. אבל זה אירוע שהיה ונגמר, הוא לא משהו מתמשך.
This war is very different than the previous wars. The previous wars in Ofakim, the Grad missiles fell. They had to deal with people who were wounded. They found the missile, and that was the end of that.
המלחמה הזו, מעבר לזה שהיה רצף של 6:30 בבוקר, רצף של אזעקות, ואנשים שאין להם מקלטים בבית, ובערך לא מעט תושבים, אז בוא נגיד ששליש מתושבי המקום אין להם מקלטים, הם רצים החוצה למיגוניות.
Okay, so in this war, the sirens started nonstop from 6:30 in the morning. 1/3 of the people do not have bomb shelters. They run to what are called miguniyot, which are concrete structures where you can hide from missiles.
שבעצם מגיעים מחבלים מהאוויר ומהקרקע, אופנועים, רכבים וגם עם סוגים של רחפנים, יורים מלמעלה ומלמטה באנשים.
The terrorists came on the hang gliders and in various forms of vehicles, motorcycles, cars, etc. They were shooting from above and from below.
הירי הוא שיטתי, הוא בית בית, נקישות בבית בית, הוצאת האנשים והריגתם, כניסה לתוך מקלטים ולמיגוניות, אוסף של אנשים במיגוניות, ופשוט גם אם אנשים סגרו את המיגונית, ירי בתוך המיגונית, בתוך חור האוורור של המיגונית, עד שממש פוגעים באנשים.
They were going from door to door, pulling people out of their houses and killing them. And in the migunit, in the concrete structures, they were shooting into the air holes and killing the people inside.
אנשים בעצם רואים את הילדים שלהם ואת ההורים שלהם נרצחים, כשהגופות, ואין מי שמגיע לעזור להם, והגופות לא מפונות עד למחרת.
People saw their parents and their children being killed, and there was nobody there to save them.
חלק מהגופות הייתה בהם התעללות, ביטרו אותם, מול המשפחות, מול האנשים, שלמשל בני משפחה, שיש משפחה קפקזית, שהילד ראה שבעצם מתעללים בגופה של אחותו והוא יוצא החוצה ורוצחים גם אותו. סיפורים, באמת סיפורים מאוד מאוד קשים שהתוצאות שלהם, תכף נדבר על התוצאות.
And the bodies were desecrated, some of the bodies were desecrated in the presence of the relatives of those people.
מדובר פה בשכונה שהיא שכונה מוחלשת, שהיא מוגדרת שהיא הובחנה בעבר כשכונה חלשה, בעיקר בעוני.
This is a very poor neighborhood. This specific neighborhood that was attacked is a very poor neighborhood in Ofakim.
אנשים עניים, אנשים עולים חדשים מאתיופיה, מברית המועצות, וגם יוצאי עדות המזרח, שחלקם לא יודעים קרוא וכתוב, ממש אנשים שהם מוותיקי העיר, זקנים בעיקר.
Including new immigrants from Ethiopia, new immigrants from the former Soviet Union, and also Edot HaMizrach, Jews of Oriental lands, but from previous generations, some of whom do not know how to read and write in Hebrew.
רגע, נראה מבחינת זמנים, יש עוד 6 דקות. בשונה ממדינת ישראל, אופקים הוכרזה כמקום אני רק רגע אגיד, מי שבעצם מגן על התושבים, זה בעצם מעט שוטרים שהיו פה בעיר, ואנשים שיצאו מהבתים שלהם.
The people who defended the people in Ofakim were some policemen who happened to be there, and people who came out of their houses who had weapons who defended their neighbors.
צריך לחשוב על זה שאנחנו כל הזמן חושבים שהצבא יבוא יגן עלינו, המשטרה תבוא תגן עלינו. ברגעים האלה בעצם יוצאים אזרחים, חבר טוב שלי ושל יעל, משה אוחיון יוצא עם הבן שלו, ובקרב עם המחבלים, הוא והבן שלו נהרגים אחרי באמת, אני רוצה להגיד לכם, זה עשרות מחבלים, וזה לא, אנשים עם אקדחים מול טילים, מול טילי כתף, מול רכב אוטומטי, מול נשק אוטומטי.
Two of the people killed were Moshe Chayan and his son, who were good friends of Yaloma and of Yael Rakov Drori, who's on the screen here. And they went out to defend their neighbors, and it was 2 people with handguns against dozens of armed terrorists.
אחד מההרוגים קוראים לו אבי בוזגלו, הוא היה בן נוער אצלי במנהיגות הנוער, יש לנו גם מנהיגות נוער, שכשהוא היה קטן, הוא אמר לי, אני לא רוצה להיות כמו השכונה שלי, בשכונה שלי כולם לוקחים סמים, אני רוצה להיות אדם טוב, אני רוצה להיות מישהו אחר. ואבי היה בבית כשהוא שמע בעצם את ההתקלות עם המחבלים, הוא יצא עם נעלי בית, והוא גם נהרג בקרב הזה.
One of the people was Avi Buzaglo, who grew up in a very poor family. When he was a child, he told Yaloma that when he grows up, he doesn't want to be in that category of a poor person. He wants to make something out of his life. And he went out in his slippers to fight with the terrorists, and he was killed.
ההתייחסות של מדינת ישראל לאופקים הייתה שונה משאר המקומות, משאר העוטף, מאשקלון, משדרות. את אופקים החליטו לא לפנות, ובאופקים לא היה מרכז חוסן, ובעצם יעל ואני מוצאות את עצמנו מתחילת המלחמה, מנסות לתת מעטפת נוספת למה שהרשות נתנה.
Unlike many of the other towns near Gaza, for whatever reason, the state of Israel did not evacuate the inhabitants of Ofakim. They're still mostly in the city, as opposed to, for example, Sderot, where the entire city was evacuated, which has led to a lot of problems that have to be dealt with. And Yaloma and Yael Rakov-Drori, who is on the screen here, they are both dealing with the problems of the city of Ofakim that have arisen since the war. And I would add that one of the 7 things we are supporting in our emergency campaign is direct support for what Yael and Yaloma are doing in Ofakim. That is one of the things we are supporting with our emergency campaign.
למשל, תגבור...
אולי תדברי על הייעוץ הפסיכולוגי.
זה בדיוק מה שאני מתכוונת, כן. למשל, גיוס...
אז נצטרך לסיים, אוקיי.
טוב, למשל גיוס הקליניקה לפסיכולוגיה של אוניברסיטת בן גוריון, שהיא נמצאת פה כבר 6 שבועות, והיא תהיה פה עד סוף השנה. הצלחנו לשכנע אותם שאנחנו צריכים אותם עד סוף השנה. אז ביום ראשון, מ-10 בבוקר, ממש עד שעות הערב המאוחרות, יהיו פה פסיכולוגים, בואו נגיד שזה התגבור שלנו, ייעוץ של עורכי דין, שבעצם יעזרו לאנשים במיצוי זכויות, וגם תוספת של מנות חמות. היום אנחנו מספקים 350 מנות חמות בכל יום לתושבי העיר, ולקראת סוף השבוע 700 מנות, שצריך לחשוב על זה שפעם ילדים היו מקבלים אוכל בבית הספר, היום יש יותר ילדים שנשארים בבית, אז קצת ניסינו להקל על המצוקה של המשפחות.
Okay, so there are three main emergency activities that they're doing that I know that we are funding. One of them is hot meals, on weekdays 350 meals, on Shabbat 700. Psychological counseling, they arranged with the Ben Gurion University to send psychologists. We're helping to pay for those psychologists. ומה היה הדבר השלישי?
מיצוי זכויות.
הייעוץ משפטי, legal advice, to help people deal with the bureaucracy to get money from the government to repair their homes and all sorts of other problems that have arisen as a result of the war. אולי תגידי איזה משפט סיום, יהלומה, פשוט...
אני אגיד משפט סיום, אני חושב, מדרשת שכטר הזמינו אותנו ליום הפגה, אנחנו לא יצאנו בכלל להפגות כל המתנדבים, ואנחנו ביום הזה גם יהיה לנו מדרש וגם ארוחת צהריים ואיזו הופעה, וזה מחמם את הלב. אני מרגישה חלק משכטר, אני מרגישה חלק מהקהילה הזאת. אני רוצה להגיד שדורון מקבל רבנות ב-27 לחודש, והוא בחר בי ללוות אותו. אני חושבת שזה אומר הרבה, שבאמת זה לא דבר מובן מאליו. אני מרגישה לגמרי חלק משכטר, ובגלל זה אני רוצה את המשך השיתופי פעולה שלנו באופקים.
יפה. Yaloma ended with 2 beautiful stories. One is that Rabbi Arena arranged for 55 people from Ofakim to come to Neve Schechter this week, December 13th, for Hanukkah. That's our Tel Aviv campus. They're going to study some midrash. They're going to have a concert. They're going to eat some good food. For many of them, it will be their first time outside of Ofakim since October 7th. And the other thing is that Doron Rubin, who has been one of our main contact people with Ofakim for many years, is being ordained as a rabbi by the Schechter Rabbinical Seminary on December 27th. Rabbi Chayron Becker, the dean, is on this Zoom. And he chose Yaloma as one of the people to accompany him down the aisle to his hasmacha, to his ordination, which Yaloma says is a wonderful way of expressing the affection and the warm relationship between Schechter and the people of Ofakim. Yaloma, thank you very much. I just want to add at the end, I read on the internet, I didn't know this, that Yaloma was invited to speak at the AIPAC conference in Washington a number of years ago. There were 18,000 people there, and they gave her a standing ovation. Well, now you can figure out why. Toda rabba, Yaloma. Our next speaker is Rabbi David Arias, who, as you can see from his green jacket, is in Miluim right now. In the south, he'll tell you exactly as much as he can about what he is doing. Rabbi Arias was born and raised in Chile. Among other things, he has a BA in music. He made Aliyah about 10 years ago in 2014. He met his wife, Diana, here. They have a child. He was ordained by the Schechter Rabbinical Seminary in December 2018, I believe. He has been the rabbi of Kilat Moriah since the middle of 2019. In other words, since he was ordained as a rabbi and is working at Kilat Moriah, first he had a pandemic and then a war. So I gather, Rabbi Arias, that you can handle any situation. Not that people should have to deal with either situation, but David, bevakasha.
Thank you, Rabbi Golinkin, and thank you, Yaloma. That's very inspiring to hear from you as well. I want to thank you all for being here. I want to thank you, anyone. I know that there are many people here from all over the globe, and part of the things that actually give us power and energy is all these messages and calls and phone calls and emails and messages from colleagues and families and friends around the world that we are fighting also for them, to keep this Jewish state alive. As Rabbi Golinkin said at the beginning, it's not the same war, but it's in a way it's pretty similar what we are living today here. On October 7 here in Israel was Simchat Torah. As you might know, we have only one day of Yom Tov holiday here. We had also a Shabbat Chatan, that Shabbat in our congregation in Haifa. And I was Shaliach Tzibur in the morning and Shacharit. And I saw the chairman of our committee, the chairman of the board, moving from one place to another, and said something weird is happening. And I asked him what's going on. He said two or three sentences, and I immediately understood that something was something really, really bad was happening, and something that was totally different from previous war. He said, well, they're launching missiles and rockets from Gaza. I said, well, that's our routine in Israel. And he said, yeah, but the thing is, there are some terrorists had entered to Israeli territory, and it has been said in the news that there are Israeli hostages in Gaza. And on 7th of October 2023, we commemorate 50 years of the Yom Kippur War, and one of the most, and I read a few articles and saw a few documentaries on TV on September commemorating the war. And one of the things that I even talked about this on Yom Kippur on one of my drashot, it was that although we succeeded to handle this war and to come up once again, but one of the hardest things that people who survived this war, especially soldiers, of course, they talked about the Shevi of being captured, which is, according to many sources, a very, very hard situation. And we are commanded to do everything to bring back these people. So when the chairman of the congregation said this 2 or 3 sentences, I immediately understood that something wrong was going on. So I decided to turn on my phone, and it seems to me that was the right decision, because it was already a missed call from my commander from our reserve unit that I should present myself the next day in the south in Shizafon, which is 50 kilometers or half an hour or 40 minutes away from Eilat, up north from Eilat. That's the base. And so we went there. And I said to my wife, and I said to my son, who is almost 4 years old, that Daddy is going. And as Rabbi Golinkin said, as a rabbi, through a pandemic and having lived in 2 different countries and different cities and studying and meeting people, nothing prepares you to one morning say to your son that is going to the war. And just let me correct you one thing: it's not only that is going to work, but we are also expecting for a baby. So it was even a little bit harder. But that's what gave us the energy. because we just want to make sure that our next son or daughter is gonna born in a better place, in a better world. So I will tell you that on Thursday evening, when we started celebrating Hanukkah, every year when we sing Al Anisim Ve'al Niflaot, while we light the candles, I try to connect myself to each one of the words. Al Anisim, I can see many nisim, many miracles around us, even the only existence of the state of Israel. And that's one of the reasons why we say also this beautiful prayer, Al Anisim, also in Yom Ha'atzmaut, Ve'al Niflaot, Ve'al Teshuot, and for all the glory and salvations and stuff. But I never thought that I would pray and sing with such a kavanah the words Ve'al Milchamot, and for the wars. And it moved us all, because as I saw a few days ago on social media, someone posted a phrase saying, it is so weird that we see latkes and sufganiyot being prepared all over the country when we are still stuck in Simchat Torah. We are still stuck there at the end of Tishrei and the beginning of October. But I think that the message of Hanukkah, I don't consider myself as a modern Maccabee, but we are in a different but similar situation. I think that part of the miracles of Hanukkah, as is told also in the Sefer Maccabees, the book of Maccabees, and also in the Talmud, there are different perspectives of the same story, as we have also different perspectives and the stories of this war. And I think personally that one of the miracles is the miracle of not quitting that easily, and not just to keep moving on when there is no chance. There was no chance for the oil to keep lighting for 8 days, and when our enemies today in 2023 thought that there wouldn't be any chance that Israelis will be united once again, after all this long year that we have been going through, the last 10 or 8 months before the war, 2 days after the war started, we already had 38 how do you say 300,000 soldiers, which was a record in terms of the reservists coming to the war. And I see this personally on my unit. I serve in the 460 brigade, which is a brigade of armored corps, in a logistic battalion or company. I don't know the exact word. I am a truck driver. I usually take things from one place to another. The last few weeks I've been busy driving, bringing stuff to soldiers to the border, even inside the Gaza Strip, and bringing an engine of a tank because it was attacked. So we changed the engine of the tank in the middle of Gaza, which is a very surrealistic scene. And what I really enjoy the most is not the job, but being in touch with so many people from different places, from different backgrounds. I'm a conservative rabbi serving here, and we have Orthodox people here. We have Orthodox rabbis. We are sitting currently in Merkaz Shapira, which is a sort of a Orthodox village with a very famous yeshiva, and been accepted as an equal, even though that in other areas of the Israeli society, I'm not accepted as an equal as a conservative rabbi, but as a soldier and as who I am, being accepted and being appreciated as a person who it's doing everything that he can to save the country, to sort of win this war, has been a tremendous experience. So we have here people from all over the country, even from other places in the world, who came specially to serve in the IDF and in the reserve unit.
Toda rabba, David. Thank you very much, and b'hatzlacha rabba b'hamshech. We now switch over to our third speaker, Inbal Sidbon, born and raised in Beersheba. She's been an active member of the Masorti movement in Israel for 10 years, an active member of congregation Eshel Avraham in Beersheba. She is now in her second year of rabbinical school at the Schechter Rabbinical Seminary. And since May 2021, she has been working to earn money at Dfus Be'eri, the Be'eri printing press, which for those of you in the diaspora, you may not know what that means. But the Be'eri printing press is the largest printing press in the state of Israel, and it is on Kibbutz Be'eri, which was destroyed by the terrorists on October 7th. So Inbal has many, many stories to tell, but not that much time. But bevakasha Inbal, please share whatever you would like to share with us. V'matzricha ezra b'tirgum ani asmach.
כן, אני אדבר בעברית.
Okay, so I will translate.
כן, כדי לא לחפש את המילים, אלא פשוט לדבר אותם. אז כן, אז אני עובדת בקיבוץ בארי, בבית הדפוס, והוא באמת הבית דפוס הכי...
At the printing shop at Kibbutz Be'eri.
הוא באמת הדפוס הכי גדול בארץ והכי חשוב.
The largest and most important printing house in Israel. Some other printers might disagree, but
לצורך העניין כמה דוגמאות, רישיונות...
largest for sure.
רישיונות הנהיגה מודפסים בבארי, רישיונות נשק מודפסים בבארי, הצ'קים מודפסים בבארי.
Checks are printed at Be'eri, driver's licenses, you name it. Any government document is printed at Dfus Be'eri.
בדיוק, גם הבחירות.
Oh, and also the election slips.
ובבארי יש באמת המון סיפורים. בית הדפוס חזר לעבוד ב-15 באוקטובר.
The printing shop started working again at Be'eri on October 15th, despite everything that happened on October 7th.
אני אישית חזרתי ב-22 לאוקטובר, כי...
We went back to work on October 22nd at the printing shop.
פשוט כי באגף שלי, מי שמפעיל את המכונות, יש שניים כאלה. אחד היה בחול וניצל, ואחד נרצח.
מי שמפעיל את המכונות? Okay,
Yeah.
among the two main people who actually run the printing presses, one was outside of the country on October 7th, and the other was murdered.
כשאני חזרתי לקיבוץ, לפני זה לא הכרתי את הקיבוץ, את הגודל שלו ואת את הבתים. היום אני מכירה אותו כמו את כף היד שלי.
לפני המלחמה, את לא הכרת את כל הקיבוץ?
לא.
Oh, so before the war, Inbal really did not know the entire kibbutz. She just knew where she worked. As a result of the war, now she knows the entire kibbutz, every single house.
כל בית בקיבוץ, בין אם הוא נשרף או בין אם הוא פוצץ, זה סיפור של משפחה. יש המון סיפורים. אני חושבת
every house there, whether it was bombed or burned, each one belonged to a family, and there are many, many stories.
אני לא חושבת שלא שעה ואפילו לא יממה יספיקו לספר את כל הסיפורים, גם לא שנים.
A day or even years would not suffice to tell all the stories.
בית הדפוס בנס לא נשרף, לא פוצץ,
The printing
וחזר.
shop by miracle was not blown up or burnt.
אבל מה שכן, 10 חברי קיבוץ שעובדים בדפוס נרצחו ב7 באוקטובר.
10 of the people, the kibbutz members who work at Dfus Be'eri were killed on October 7th.
3 מעובדי הדפוס נחטפו.
3 of the workers at the printing shop were kidnapped.
1 חזרה.
1 has returned, one of the women.
1 נודע לנו לפני יומיים שנרצח.
Just 2 days ago,
בשבי.
they learned that one of the other people kidnapped was killed. Be'aza, who נרצח?
כן.
Was killed in Aza. כן, אני מבין שקשה.
אותו אחד שנרצח הוא הגיס לעתיד של חברה הכי טובה שלי.
the one who was killed, that the one we just mentioned, was the future brother-in-law of Inbal's best friend.
ועוד אחד שחטוף בעצם בעזה שעובד בדפוס, הוא הקב"ט של בית הדפוס.
מה זה הקב"ט?
קצין ביטחון, סליחה.
קב"ט, לא שמעתי. He is one of the ones who was kidnapped is the קצין ביטחון, the defense officer of the kibbutz, in charge of security.
בדפוס.
Excuse me, the security officer of the printing house.
Security chief. Yes.
Security chief of the printing house.
אז נורא קשה להיות בבארי בימים האלה, כי זה גם שטח צבאי סגור.
It's difficult to be there now. It's a closed military area. They go in by escort.
כן. אבל עם זאת, הדפוס חזר לעבוד, החקלאות חזרה לעבוד בקיבוץ, חדר אוכל חזר לעבוד.
The agriculture was working again. החדר אוכל גם כן. And the kibbutz cafeteria is working again.
ואחד האנשים בבארי שהיה בעבר ראש המועצה, אמר, כמו לפני 50 שנה, החיטה תשוב לצמוח.
One of the, מה התפקיד שלו, ראש המועצה?
לשעבר, והוא גר בבארי.
A former head of the council, of the area council, said that just like 50 years ago, after the Yom Kippur War, the wheat will sprout again, which is a quote from a song.
אז עם כמה שזה נורא קשה ומאתגר וחדשות קשות מגיעות כל שבוע, יחד עם החדשות הטובות שהילדים החטופים וחלק מהאנשים חזרו, מנסים לייצר איזושהי שגרה מוזרה שכזו.
There's bad news, as we know, every day, every week. There's also good news, the kidnapped people who were returned, especially the children. But nonetheless, we try and have a shigra, a normal activities at this difficult time.
ואם יש משהו אחד שזמר מאוד חשוב אמר לי שבוע שעבר, מה שמראים בחדשות, תמונות, סרטונים, זה לא קרוב למה שרואים במציאות.
מי אמר את זה? זמר?
שלומי שבת.
Shlomi Shabbat, a well-known Israeli singer, said to her last week that what they show on the news in no way approaches the reality.
צריך להגיע ולראות. בבקשה.
תודה רבה. Okay, אחרון חביב, last but not least, is Itai Roenbecker, who grew up in Ramot Zion, was active in Noam, the Noar Masorti, the Masorti youth movement, in the army. He was in Sayeret HaNachal. אל תגיד, אין לי מושג איך אומרים סיירת באנגלית. מה זה סיירת באנגלית?
Ranger unit.
Ranger unit of the Nachal. Thank you, Itai. He has an MA in geography and an MBA. He worked as a paramedic for Magen David Adom. He worked in marketing high-tech. He set up a number of companies related to renovations. Excuse me, I'm about to sneeze.
Bless you.
My cold has nothing to do with Hanukkah. He was the head of the Vadat Hanor of the youth committee of the Masorti movement for 6 years. He served in active Miluim reserve duty until age 40. And since then, he has been volunteering, as do many Israelis after the official age has ended. He is married to Rabbi Chaim Roenbecker, the dean of our Schechter Rabbinical Seminary, whom we saw before sitting next to Itai. They have 4 kids, including one in the army, and their dog Hummus, which we must mention.
We must.
So without further ado, Itai, bevakasha.
Hi. I'll give you a small. I'll try to keep it brief because basically, the events leading up to my being called up to active reserve duty are the same as everyone else's. We started out Simchat Torah October 7th with I think 2 missile warnings. In Jerusalem, it's not something that we're used to hearing. And then one of our neighbors, as we were going out to shul, one of our neighbors said that there are terrorists in Sderot, and that these sirens are going off all over the country. Simchat Torah was very low key this year, and as the day was evolving, even though our phones are normally off, I had a feeling that that it's going to end the way it did, and I think about 3 hours before Shabbat was out, before the Chag was out, I got a call calling me up into active duty. It's what we call an 8th sector accord, which means that you have to immediately go to the base that you are assigned to. As Rabbi Golinkin mentioned, I was in a range unit in the when I was in my mandatory army duty, and regular infantry battalions have reserve ranger units as well. And I was serving on one of those ranger units. Unfortunately, I had the displeasure of dealing with another war as a reservist in 2006 in Lebanon. My unit is designated for the North, so that's where we train. That's what we're trained for, and that's where we're supposed to report to when things like these happen. And when I reached the age of 40, which is the mandatory age for reserve duty, my unit asked me to stay on as a volunteer, and I've been volunteering ever since. So basically, I'm once you sign the volunteer letter, you're just considered another soldier like every other soldier. You don't really have a different status. You just have to renew your agreement to volunteer every few years. So basically, I'm right now signed up for another 2 years. I'll be 48 in January. I think I was at the base by about 11 o'clock p.m. and 2 days later we were already on the Lebanon border. I think this is the first time since Yom Kippur that Israel enlisted or called up all of its reservists for active duty, and most of them have been in since. Currently, you can see I'm not in uniform. I was released for a 30-day leave. What they're doing is in the areas where the combat isn't serious, they're trying to rotate the forces, so people get a chance to be at home a little. Everyone was called up without any prior warning, so everything was just basically up in the air. And in one of the kibbutzim where we were staying, we got there and it's January, it's December, and there's still Sukkot up because the kibbutzim in the north were all evacuated, and no one had time to take down the sukkah. They're all still up there. It's like time froze up in the north. It's really like time froze up in the north because the northern border didn't have as much damage, not nearly as much damage as everywhere in the settlements surrounding the Gaza Strip. So it's just time freezing in Simchat Torah as opposed to the unimaginable damage that there is down in the south. So within 48 hours, there were a tremendous amount of troops up in the northern border, and we've been there since. My unit being mostly charged with reconnaissance, put up 3 posts which were directly and indirectly in charge, responsible for about 20% of the casualties within Hezbollah. So the war in the northern border isn't as communicated as the south, and rightfully so. It's not nearly as intense, but Israel and Hezbollah exchange rockets every now and then, and when our soldiers are there to see where they're shooting from, then we're able to return what is called effective fire, which means that we're shooting to an exact place and not just generally to where we think they are. And in those cases, we're able to inflict a little bit more damage than they are on our side. It's not pleasant, but it's not as terrible as the southern border. One thing that's important to note, I think, and I think I'll end on that, is that we recently met with the chief, the Aluf Pikud Tzafon, the head of the northern border in the area.
The Northern Command, the head of the Northern Command.
And what he said was that 2 days after October 7th, so October 9th, 10th, Hezbollah was ready to invade Israel in a similar way. So they had plans on doing that. They would just not, apparently the Hamas avoided sharing their intentions with Hezbollah in order to avoid Israel finding out about them. So two days later, October 9th, October 10th, Hezbollah was ready to invade as well within 15 minutes, but they sent up test balloons. So they sent in Islamic Jihad units trying to breach the border, and they all were met with tremendous force. And the fact that Israel was so strong on the northern border apparently prevented them from actually going forward with their plans, and eventually drove Hezbollah several kilometers back. So from a situation where when we went up there, Hezbollah was sitting physically on the Israeli border, we're now in a situation where most of Hezbollah fighters are about 5 to 10 kilometers back, retreated back into Lebanon, and only the lower ranking soldiers are still in the area of the border, trying not to be seen, because when they're seen, they're usually shot at and more often than not hit. So while we're not actively fighting, the presence is most probably preventing Israel from having to open another front in the northern border.
Thank you very much, Itai. If any of you have any questions or comments, the two of our speakers, I think, already left, but if you want to ask Inbal any questions or Itai, feel free. I think you can unmute yourselves.
I just, Itai,
Yes, Geraldine.
I was on a Zoom a while ago when your wife came to talk to Women's League. I'm so happy to see you here now. Blessings. Just blessings.
Right. Rabbi Chaya spoke to Women's League over Zoom, so now
Yes.
Geraldine gets to meet Itai.
Yes.
Any other questions or comments? So as we said, if you want to read my little article about the importance of studying the book of Maccabees on Hanukkah, it's in the chat. If you would like to support our emergency work in Israel, the link is also in the chat. In addition to supporting Ofakim, we have 2 projects of the Schechter Rabbinical Seminary, sending out rabbinical students to Kehilot, to congregations, and a hotline for halachic questions related to death and mourning, which unfortunately needs no explanation why we set up that hotline together with the Rabbinical Assembly of Israel. Another hotline run by our chaplaincy program of Marpei of the Schechter Institute, where people can call in just to talk about the situation and unload the way that they are feeling. The Tawi school system, which is directly teaching children, evacuated children in hotels, and also sending out 3 times a week lesson plans and videos to 9,000 educators all over the country that they are using out in the field. Just to explain what that means, Dr. Perry Sinclair, the director of Tali, did the math. 9,000, those 9,000 educators teach 270,000 children. So they are using the Tali materials on a regular basis since 1 week after the war began. At Neve Schechter in Tel Aviv, we are running a special program for Russian and Ukrainian immigrants. By the way, there are 60,000 such immigrants in Israel since the war began in Ukraine. And we have a special program for them at Neve Schechter. And we are offering them psychological counseling and a monthly stipend. And last but not least, we are giving special 75% MA scholarships to people who were evacuated from their homes and to tour guides. As you can imagine, tour guides right now are unemployed in Israel. And so people who are evacuated from their homes and tour guides can receive a 75% scholarship this year for their MA studies at Schechter. So if you would like to support any of those projects, you can simply click on our emergency campaign in the chat. We thank our 4 speakers, Yaloma, David, Inbal, and Itai. We thank Josh for organizing all of this. And I want to conclude again with the words of Ala Nisim, as per the version of Rav Amram Gaon in the 8th century. Keshem sha'asita imahem nes, ken aseh imanu. Adonai Eloheinu nisim v'niflaot ba'et hazot, v'nodeh l'shimcha agadol selah. Just as you did for them a miracle, so may you do for us, O Lord our God, miracles and wonders at this time, and we will thank your great name forever. Toda rabah and Chag Urim Sameach. Happy Hanukkah.